The most significant expense you will have when moving to Merida, Mexico is your housing. So it's important that you do not have hiccups or mistakes when it comes to finding a rental house or apartment in Merida. The real estate market in Merida, Mexico is very different from what you and I may be accustomed to in the United States or Canada. Many rentals require a large sum of money, usually in cash, to complete the rental process. Generally, rentals will require 3 to 4 times the rental rate with all the fees and required deposits. This could result in you needing thousands of dollars to secure your housing in Merida, Mexico. Coupled with the fact that there are also people out there to take advantage of your limited knowledge about the real estate market and process, finding housing in Merida, Mexico becomes a high stakes game. So today I want to tell you about 5 pitfalls to avoid when renting and what actions you should take to protect yourself and win at renting in Merida, Mexico. Let's get it. Now, before we get into the 5 things you do not want to do, let's quickly review the rental process in Merida, Mexico. Rental process in Merida, Mexico is really 3 parts. Find a property that you like, put down a deposit to hold the property and remove it from the market, and close on the property by signing a rental contract and promissory notes. This is a very oversimplification of the process, but it gives you the different steps needed to obtain housing here in Merida. The first bit of advice I want to give you is don't pay someone a huge amount of money to find you a house. The landlords pay the people in the real estate business out of the deposits that you put down. I've seen in 2023 that the real estate agents are starting to ask for money up front to show properties. Keep in mind that they also get paid by the landlords when you sign the contract, so they're kind of double dipping in your pocket. This is a new thing that has emerged in group discussions over the last 7 to 8 months. Anybody here can claim to be a real estate agent because the process is unlicensed and requires no background checks. So instead of paying someone lots of money to find you a property, I recommend you do this. When hiring a real estate agent, I would go with referrals, check references from previous customers, ensure that they speak Spanish and English. That's very important so that you can have clear communication. Make sure that they clearly understand the real estate market and process. They should also know what are reasonable requests for rents, deposits, legal contracts, and etc. The agent should be able to help you negotiate these things in Spanish and understand when things are off in the house or with the other parties, such as the other real estate agents or the landlord. My second piece of advice for you is don't rush the process. Let me repeat that. Don't rush the process. Many folks arrive in Merida, Mexico intent on finding a rental house in the first week or 2. Because of this timeline, they rush through the process. I can promise you that rushing through the process will cost you more money. Take your time. Your mantra during the search portion of your process should be location, location, and landlord. Let me explain. The location should meet your lifestyle and your budget requirements, but the most critical aspect of the rental process is the landlord. The best property in your budget with the wrong landlord is the wrong property. The landlord is the most crucial variable when renting in Mexico. Getting a feel for how they will handle obstacles and problems will go a long way to understanding how the relationship will play out. When renting here in Mexico, you become like the homeowner. You are responsible for many of the repairs and the upkeep of the property. So ensuring that you have the right partner/landlord is critical to a successful rental situation. My third piece of advice is don't give money to anyone unless you are confident that you want to move forward with renting a place. As a cultural point, I found that in Mexico, people do not like to give money back. Whether that's a large retailer or a local store, it takes a lot to get your money returned to you. So here's what I would recommend. Get a legal document created in Spanish by a lawyer with your signature and the landlord's signature stating that the deposit is refundable if you decide not to move forward and sign the contract. Signatures are very significant here in Mexico, and this document will help you get your money back should things not materialize as promised. In fact, a good landlord would offer you this document without even needing to ask. A close friend of mine who I helped find her place had this document given to her by her landlord. That landlord was really one of the best I've encountered, and you could tell just by how well the property was maintained. You will need to keep the original wet signature version of this for your records, and if you need to, have 2 copies signed by both parties. Hey, if you're finding value in this video, I would definitely suggest you check out the Creating Your MexitPlans course. I'll leave a link to it above and also in the description notes below. Speaking of signatures, the number 4 thing that I recommend that you not do is don't sign anything unless you know what it says. All contracts in Mexico must be in Spanish to be legal. Having an English version of some document means nothing if it's not in Spanish. Have every legal document reviewed by a lawyer before you sign them. I would actually suggest that you bring your lawyer with you to the contract closing. This is exactly what I did when I went to renew my lease, and my lawyer discovered some very unethical clauses in the lease that should have been identical to the original lease. The attorney added 2 new clauses unbeknownst to my landlord. The first clause stated that should I overstay my lease at the end of the 2-year period, I would have to pay 500 pesos per day. That clause wasn't a big deal for me as I've seen it before, and so I was completely okay with that. There was a second part to this clause that was very interesting. The second part to the overstay clause was that if I overstayed, I had to pay 10% of the market value of the property. Now hold on a second. In Merida, Mexico, there isn't an MLS system. There isn't the idea of this property next door sold for X amount of dollars, therefore the comp value of this property is Y. It's really whatever they want to ask, and there's no real way of obtaining the true value of a property. For me to sign something that says I'm going to pay 10% of whatever the value of this property is would be crazy. The big surprise of that whole clause was the attorney wrote that the 10% of the value of the property would go to him and not to the landlord. And my landlord had no idea that that was in there. So he was trying to get over on me as well as the landlord. That clause was obviously removed before we would move forward with signing the lease. But that just goes to show why it's so important to have your lawyer with you to review the documents as they're being drafted. At the end of the process, when you go to sign the contract and get your keys, one of the things that you have to pay are the contract fees. Because you're paying those contract fees, you have the right to select a notary. You can also negotiate the terms of the lease. Many times, the contract fee will be equal to the rent or some number just below that amount. So let's say the rent is 20,000 pesos per month. They will tell you that the contract fee is anywhere equal to 15 to 20,000 pesos. The actual cost to file a contract with the notary is only a few thousand pesos. So what happens is the landlord and the lawyer will often get together and split the additional money that they make over what the true cost of the contract fees are. So if the contract fees are 20,000 and the true cost is really 5,000, the landlord and the lawyer will split the other $15,000. This is something that's never really discussed, but it's tradition here in the Yucatan. All the notaries in Mexico are appointed by the state. If your landlord doesn't want to use a different notary, this is a clue that they're probably getting a kickback from the notary. The 5th thing that I will tell you is once you sign a contract and long-term lease, don't forget to get the promissory notes every single month from your landlord. This should actually be a mandatory condition upon you paying for the next month's rent. Failure to get the promissory note for the rent that you're paying could have an unethical landlord claiming that you still owe money for rent that you paid months ago. The promissory notes that you sign are legal debt instruments here in Mexico. You're admitting to the debt for the duration of the lease process. For those that have made it this far, here's a bonus tip. Don't think breaking your lease will not have repercussions here in Mexico. It's getting harder for folks to rent because of bad advice by some people on the internet that have advised in the past you should break your lease and walk away when things don't go as you expect. This is why you should spend as much time as you need to know who you're dealing with and do your best to hire an attorney to assess the situation. The promissory notes are enforceable even if you decide to leave and break your lease. Furthermore, your possessions in the house can be held as payment for that debt that you signed with those promissory notes. Several recent immigrants here to Merida have messed around and found this out the hard way. If you take your time, do your due diligence, and watch out for the sharks, you'll find that the long-term rental process here in Merida, Mexico will be a piece of cake. If you're interested in seeing the process that I've used to find my housing and housing of friends and clients in the past, leave me comments below. If you want to know more about renting in Mexico, check out this video I did years ago over here. Until next time, MexitPlans Monty, I'm out.